Hello, everyone. Welcome in to UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. Glad to be back in front of the camera and the mics to talk a little Georgia football with none other than Artie Lynch, former Georgia and NFL tight end. How's he been, Artie?
It's been good. Busy summer up here in New York City. Trying to stay cool. I call it. It's funny, and the August heat of Georgia is it's pretty daunting, as you well know, and I would imagine all of our listeners know. But in in I call it like the sewage humidity. So it's a different. It's basically the same amount of humidity here in New York, even though we're about 8 to 14 hours north of you guys, depending where you're at in the south. But it is equally as humid because just the sewage and the filth of Gotham. But it's been good, man. It's been a good summer. I'm excited to talk some football. So
Yeah,
thank
we
you as
could,
always for having me.
of course, we could refer to it as Gotham City. Arthur reporting live from Gotham City.
Yeah, it's Gotham, and I'm not Batman. I'm one of the many villains of Batman, but I'm just trying to here make a living. So
Yeah. Well, I'll stay down here then if it's like
yeah,
that.
I don't. Hey, trust me. After 10 weeks up here, I don't blame the coach.
Well, but yeah, busy summer for sure, man. A lot of changes in my life as well, man. And usually we would have been 20 shows deep this year by this time. So thank you for everyone for jumping back on with us as we go. Big changes in my life. Like it just moved in. That's why I have a green screen kind of effect going on here. I usually have like I can have an office set up. I'm still working on that. We just moved in. We're still in that process. And also, I'd like to formally announce my wife and I are expecting a baby boy in December. Thank you to after conference championship weekend. So at least I'll get to watch Georgia play the SEC championship first before my life completely changes even more. So yes, there's a lot going on, and some things had to go to the back seat, unfortunately. But we're back now for college football season.
Well, congratulations. I know you and I have talked offline many of times since about this particular subject, but uh, you too, you and your wife will be phenomenal parents. I imagine the baby boy will be a future dog, and is certainly a dog's fan. If not, you'll probably have a heart attack. But I'm excited for you, and I know everyone else who knows you is excited for you as well. So congratulations to you guys.
Thank you so much, buddy. That's a lot of love. We appreciate it, man. And that's a good thing about having such good families and friends, man. Just the love that pours on you in this time, and we're witnessing it firsthand for sure. And you mentioned it there. If he's not a dog, here's the thing. So the in-laws are Buckeyes. I think I've mentioned it here before.
You have mentioned
So
it.
dude, that's just a little bit of concern there. I'm not gonna lie, but it's a long way away. A little concern, especially when we're writing up camp reports and stuff like that. And just in the back of my mind, I'm like, Ohio State, no. But yeah, let's thank you for that. Let's get into some Georgia football here, man. Um, I've been following fall camp closely up here before Georgia Marshall kickoff August 30th. A layup for the first one. Does Georgia need it? I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think thrust into the fire, Kirby Smart teams are always really good too. But let's talk about some fall camp standouts here. Already, we got a running back here, Bo Walker, 25 signee. He had a strong spring. We talked about him in the spring. Saw
Mm-hmm.
some good things for him during G Day, and he's reportedly surged in that aspect, and he's fighting for that number 2 spot behind Nate Frazier. And obviously, this is a very important group, and I think that's why we're kicking off the show with it. It's because having a quarterback like Gunnar Stockton with just 2 starts under his belt, well, 1 start under his belt, he played the second half against Texas in that SEC championship overtime win. But having a supportive running game, we'll hear from Kirby Smart on this later in the show. But having a supporting running game is really, really important. And Georgia is always so much better, RBU, with a really good running game. And I know that starts up front too. And we'll get to that in a minute. But thinking about this running back room, man, and I remember reading earlier, I think it was the spring, I think it was ESPN. I can't remember the writers per se, but listing Georgia's running back room as a concern, which I thought there were other areas you could point at, maybe edge, offensive line after you losing some starters, wide receiver, But running back was an interesting one to me because you have players like Bo Walker, who's a highly recruited guy, comes in and really fights and battles off some year two, year three guys for snaps. And that's what he's been doing. Now, I think it would be a surprise for him to lock down the role, per se, with Roderick Robinson returning healthy. Already he played like 2 games last year, had a good true
Mhm.
frost season. Unfortunately, injuries plagued him last year. He's reportedly healthy. I've seen videos of him working out. It only adds to the hype a little bit there.
Mhm.
But man, that dude is massive, and that's what you want to see, I think, in an SEC, a long SEC season with guys who can have maybe a different change of pace. And maybe you can speak to this being alongside some really great running backs. Your time, especially at Georgia, is have like a change of pace because Bo Walker isn't Roger Robinson, who isn't Nate Frazier, right? They're all kind of
Mhm.
different in their speed, their attack, maybe north and south, maybe more like east and west, like Cass Jones. Yeah, and I think that's a really beneficial thing to have, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, this tradition started long before Kirby. It started long before Coach Rick. It dates back to Connor Herschel Walker. I saw a video the other day of that Georgia football posted. It was like running back you, and it's going through all the names, right? Your Noshans, your Todds, your Sony Michelle's, your Herschel Walkers, your Terrell Davis, Garrison Hurst. I mean, it goes on and on. It's like I remember, I think it was like 2005 to 7 years. You had, you know, on one roster, Thomas Brown, NFL guy, obviously now NFL coach, right? Greg Lumpkin. I think it's Greg, not Craig. Greg Lumpkin was a Packers running back for years. George running back, obviously no Sean Moreno, right? Those are three guys, and the two former guys leave. No Sean comes in, and they recruit Caleb King, a 5-star, Washawn Ely, a 5-star, and obviously those latter two didn't really work out. And Caleb, and No Sean had Washawn had their moments, but they were what the point of it is they were like high level recruits, right? And then the next wave of guys comes in. Keith Marshall's Ken Malcolm, if you guys remember him, he was a big time recruit, right? Carlton Thomas, another recruit. Richard Samuel was a 5-star guy when they're playing running back. I guess what I'm saying is it's never for a lack of like talent, right? So they may say it's an area of concern, not because of the talent that's on the roster, and if that's what they put in their article, it's probably inaccurate to describe it that way. In my view, it is an area of concern because of the lack of like experience, just like on the whole, the lack of that kind of like explosive, dominant power, full like athlete that we may have in that room or we may not. We just don't know, right? Like, in the past 5 to let's call it 8 years, really, let's call it past 10 years because that's time continues to go by very quickly. But it's like there's like 6 to 7 names that like have it, played legit NFL football, right? And so I think what we're looking at now, whether it be this Bo Walker guy who was a 3, 4-star, right? Not a huge recruit, but I'd say 80% of the schools in the country would love to have him and to be like the top recruit that'd be in their class.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just kind of have to wait and see, right? Georgia's always going to have a very good offensive line from a run game perspective. We can talk about the pass pro and passing game later, but I think there's plenty of talent in that room. I just think it's going to come down to two things, right? Can they find balance, right? Who's the power guy? Who's the guy who's going to be pass pro and third down, and long and passing situations, right? Who's going to be that kind of ground and pound everyday back? I think it's going to be running back as by committee. But to be very clear, Todd Gurley was probably the last running back at Georgia who was like the sole guy, right?
I
And
agree.
he like because as much of a workhorse Chubb split his entire career with Sony Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they got Swift at the end, I believe.
Right.
So it's like Gurley split with Keith Marshall his freshman year, but those 2 years, Keith was not very healthy, and it was really just Todd.
Mm-hmm.
And Todd's third year, he really split because that was Sony and Chubb's first year, right? So, no, just because the names are bigger doesn't mean that it hasn't been the same system in place for the better part of like 25 years, if that makes sense.
No, right. It makes sense to me, like committee, and that's how I think Kirby Smart wants to approach it. He's proven that, right? You just went back several years, and that's kind of what we've seen. So it's not smart, I think, to expect anything different. But I like almost the fact of having to prepare for different speeds, sizes, just their own knack for running the football for
Totally.
each running back, right? And just think of the change of pace with me. Think for a second from a Nate Frazier or specifically Roderick, who's just massive, and he's north and south. And then you have Cass Jones in the backfield, who's much smaller, quicker, laterally, and can catch the football really well. And he's proven that he can, and he's a good pass pro. And that's why they trust him so much in that spot, right? So I think that's what maybe Bo Walkers has to battle. We talk about it with these young backs is pass pro and understanding that the massive shift from the high school game to the college game in that aspect, especially offense like Bobo's. So it kind of would be a surprise for me to see, I think, Bo get a lot of snaps early because of that, especially if they're going to use him in third down and pass protection. I think Roderick has the advantage there as a third-year guy, even though he was out in injuries. And even further on this, too, is like Chauncey Bowens has shown some really good things when he's given opportunities, and Dwight Phillips Jr. And, Georgia and Bobo, I'm excited to see that here in this running back room already, because we've seen when Dwight Phillips has gotten snaps, then do some really creative things with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Son of a track legend. He has that speed. You can see it immediately. And it's one of those guys, we talk about it, where he gets the ball in his hands and he looks a bit different than the defenders running after him. It's really hard to take angles on him. So I expect to see some creative things with him too. So this is a really deep room for me. We haven't even talked about Illinois transfer Josh McCray. I don't really know where he fits in this lineup, right? And we've seen like transfer running backs come in and they haven't really gotten going and gotten snaps. I think maybe it's a system adjustment and all the things that Georgia asks of them. I'm not really sure. We just can't know. But I'm interested to see where he maybe fits in this lineup, because he is that bruiser guy. I think he had 800 yards last year, led Illinois. So he is that guy too. Maybe short yardage situations we could see a lot of. But moving on here to our favorite position, I think Georgia fans' least favorite, receiver room, right? Everybody knows led the country in drops last year on, in what we thought was going to be a really talented, dependable receiver room. And it just wasn't. Now you have a couple guys back from that room in Dylan Bell, who is so multifaceted. We talk about creative things, so maybe Dwight Phillips. I mean, Dylan is the creative guy, is the, multiple tool weapon, Swiss Army knife, if you will, of that room. He's back, and I think really expecting a jump from him as far as just catching the ball and be dependable. But a guy that's standing out, here's another true freshman. This could be one of those years of a true freshman for Georgia, because there's a lot of young guys on this roster. But he's the latest 5-star since George Pickens, so everybody was, focused in on him because of that alone. But apparently he has really stepped up to the bill and practice to that pedigree. Now, where does he fit in the lineup? That's the question. To play as a true freshman at Georgia is such a big deal. We've rarely seen it, receivers specifically too. Can he adjust to do what Georgia wants him to do from a blocking standpoint? Being in the right spots is the question, right? But he's had the chance to develop a rapport with Gunner, and Gunner's had that number one spot. Now, I know he split a lot of reps with Ryan too, but he's gotten the most of the number ones. So what is that connection like? All things considered, fall camp reports, it's well. I mean, he could be one of the top playmakers in this offense on this team. So excited about that. I think that's really good. It adds to the depth, right? Because, Artie, we saw it last year at the early part of the year, and Colby Young, how he came on kind of strong there, and a big-bodied guy, an upperclassman. He's been around a lot of football, and then he gets suspended, for that case, who's since been dropped. It was apparently bogus, and he's back in the room. So you think about his experience in that big body type with Noah Thomas, the Texas A&M transfer. Those are 2 6'4" guys right there who can win jump on one-on-ones. We didn't have that last year. You really didn't. So that's a big part of that offense you didn't have, especially when it comes to third down and red zones, right? I really like the size standpoint from these guys, and Talon Taylor's no small guy either. And you can speak on, how maybe in, big time opportunities from an offensive perspective where, Georgia was maybe getting off the field more than they liked last year, when maybe a big body guy like Colby Young or Noah Thomas, especially in the red zone, could have helped them.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, you talked about it's very hard for true freshmen to step in and play wide receiver. I would normally agree with you. I think there's two exceptions to that rule. Obviously, like uh, an otherworldly talent, right? An AJ Green or Julio Jones,
Right.
you know, Ryan, was it Ryan Williams at Alabama? Is that
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah.
It's like someone of or Amari Cooper, right?
Jeremiah Smith last year.
Jeremiah Smith, right? Like guys like that. It's just like you see him play once, you're like, all right, well that guy's going to play in the NFL for 12 years.
Yeah.
I think the other exception of the rule is when you have basically like the cupboard is you've basically looked into the bag for the past 5 years thinking that you've had multiple answers to your problem, right? And you just have not found the cure, the solution, the remedy to what has been a thorn in your side for the better part of 4 years now, right? And obviously, to me, what I'm talking about is like a reliable, consistent, dynamic playmaker. So maybe not 4 years because McConkey's probably going into year like 3 or 2 of his, but he was hurt for most of his last year.
Right.
So like, and I'm obviously excluding Brock Bowers because he's like a different beast and he's also a tight end. But as it pertains to wide receiver, there has been ample opportunities for anybody, just to like step up and take the reins to be like, I am the guy. It's 3rd and 8. Throw me the ball. I'm going to get open no matter what. And if I'm not open, I'm going to make a tough catch to bring down the ball. Like it's been non-existent. And I would even go as far to say that it's been like there hasn't even been like flashes of it, right? There has been like 1 to maybe 2 exceptions, like one-off plays, like over the course of a season. But in reality, it's just not been there. And so if a true freshman comes in and doesn't really know what to do as well as the others, but he's prone, or not prone, but he is capable and not capable. He is making tough plays, big plays. Like Bobo and company and Smarter and be like, look, we'd rather have him miss a block or a dumb mistake.
Right.
And usually we don't tolerate that. But like it's been 3 years and he's the only person stepping up, right? And I'm putting it's fill in the blank. Because at this point, the problem has become excessive and like borderline systemic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's got to change because, and we could talk about Gunner, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him next, or soon rather. But he's not seasoned enough to just be able to kind of carry a team yet. Come talk to me week 6, week 7 when he's got some like stones under his belt, like, and we'll see. But like he needs to have reliable, dependable, like gutsy and tough wide receivers that he can go to, at least one of them. So
Right.
I think that's the fundamental issue is, do we have a dynamic playmaker on the roster? I think we probably have several who have the capability of that, but no one has stepped up to fill that role yet. And you and I have now been talking about this for like 2 seasons.
Yeah.
This is going on 3.
Right. And this is talking season right now at this point too, but it's like most of the talking season around this team, this offense, this problem at receiver has been Zachariah Branch, a transfer, right? And that's kind of hard to me. I mean, he had a great freshman season as both a returner and receiver, right? And then last year was more inconsistent. Now USC as a whole was inconsistent. I mean, they benched their starting quarterback before the end of the season.
Yeah. USC's kind of a mess.
Right. So I don't think you can put much evaluation on that. But then at the same time, this guy's also learning the system, learning new teammates, learning how to catch Gunnar Stockton's ball, learning how to catch Ryan's Puglisi, who's also done well this spring and fall. getting up to speed after missing the entire spring last year. Georgia needs a good backup there, so it's important to watch. But so it's been kind of Zachariah Branch from a national perspective of, oh, this guy is going to be the playmaker, the guy to jumpstart this offense from a pass game perspective. But we just don't know. And I think he has the skill set to do that from a slot position. But can it be one guy? I don't think so at all. Right? I think he had multiple options to really threaten a defense in as many ways as possible. So I'm excited to kind of have these questions from this perspective already. Is Gunnar Stockton, I think, demands some respect from his teammates, just the way he plays and the grit he has. Now, he's not experienced. He's going to have spots where we're like, what the heck, Gunnar, what was that? But at the same time, his attitude and approach, I think, just like a team takes on its presence of its head coach, so does an offense its quarterback. And this receiver room, I think, could benefit from doing that with Gunnar. We talked about it. You said it there: grit, dependability, guts to make big plays, to go across the middle late in a game where you need a catch and knowing you're going to take a big hit. Gunnar would do it. And I think as these guys get into those pressure situations and Gunnar kind of shows them that you can do that, be successful, I think that will be really good for this receiver room to try to take on that. And just because you have the ability, I think we've seen it, in practice, we've seen it spring game at moments last year with a couple of these guys like Humphreys and Dylan Bell. But can you do it consistently? And I think that's the biggest question. We'll find out soon, but I like the opportunity here for these guys to answer that. And it's also, I think, good kind of having an underrated cloak kind of over this offense, right? No one knows really what to expect. Georgia didn't have any all-SEC preseason offensive guys on the first team, All-Americans. I think that's good. I think that really is. Go back to Nick Saban and rat poison. Kirby Smart loves that stuff. He'll use it. We've known he's used stuff like that in the past to drive guys. So, the opportunity is there, and I think the motivation will be there for these guys at receiver. We can go into Gunnar if you want, Artie. For me, expecting, being a realist is big, I think, in my fandom. And I've developed that over a long time and a lot of disappointment. But expecting some growing pains, especially, you got Tennessee coming here in week 3 at Tennessee, at Neyland, and a place that Georgia has owned, and Tennessee fans are frothing at the mouth to get a victory. It's going to be, that environment is going to be a really, really tough challenge for him because he hasn't had a true road game in the SEC nonetheless. So that'll be kind of, his intro to that challenge. Talk a little bit about that and going on the road and in that environment. What do you think, what it takes for a quarterback to be successful there? Because you've been around some good ones.
Yeah, man. It's tough because I don't know, Gunnar. The last quarterback from Georgia that I knew a little bit was Stetson, and that was very, very brief. And that was before he went on like that historic run, legendary run, if you will. I think Gunnar, I like him, right? We all read that ESPN article. He's like a Georgia. He's basically like, and again, I was probably on the Carson Beck like wagon for too long.
We both were already.
Yeah. And I still don't think he's a bad dude. He's just he's
kid.
He's a kid, dude. It's fine. I mean, they make a lot of money, but they're still decision-making process is that of a 21-year-old, right?
Right.
That being said, from like a fan's perspective, from like a Georgia, like a true, like, your Georgia fan who's from like Macon, Georgia, right? From middle Georgia, South Georgia, or from inside the loop, Atlanta, like just your dog in, dog out, good old Georgia fan. Like they love like the pedigree of Gunnar Stockton. They love his name. Right. They love where he's from. They love his accolades that he came in with. They love that he was sent to Mars on a hit in the SEC championship game and refused to come out and came back in. And even my sisters who are like, and my mom who we're a bunch of like Yankees, as you all would call us, right? No fealty to Georgia football other than when I played there. Like, and now we're all diehard fans. Like they love Gunnar Stockton, right? And I say all that to say this, right? He's going to be given, I think, he's been given a lot of grace because of that pedigree. I think if like he had the pedigree of Carson Beck, right? Saying his name right? Yeah, that's him. See, I already forgot him. That's a true Georgia fan. I don't know how forgiving the fan base would be, but he's got to prove himself. Like at this stage, right? He's had some time to play some meaningful snaps. I think he was given a lot of grace and leeway there because of the situation he was put into.
Mm-hmm.
But there's really no excuses moving forward because he's now been the guy since he was named starter last year. He's going to have he's going to be able to kind of not ease into it, but that Tennessee game, to your point, is coming very quick. And if he lays an egg and he just is abysmal, which I don't think he will be, I think he'll actually he'll have a good season. And I think Georgia's actually going to surprise a lot of people over the course of the year. I don't think we're going to be 14-0 and win the whole thing, but I think we're going to get better each week, and we're going to be in a position to go on a run to the national championship at the end. But Gunner, a lot of pressure's on him, dude. A lot of pressure. And I think Kirby knows that. I think Bobo knows that. I think the team knows that. I think they are behind him. But at the end of the day, these guys are hyper, borderline ruthlessly competitive, right? So it's like if he lays a dud in Tennessee, I could see him getting pulled, right? If it's second half and they're getting run up and down the field, from a quarterback who played at UCLA last year in Knoxville, they'll put publicity in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan's a talent, right?
Yeah.
He's the beautiful thing about Kirby Smart, and really this has been going on for a long time, like before even Kirby, is like the backup had offers from everywhere in the country too, right? I was Orson Charles' backup. I was a high school American, right? My backup was Jay Rome. He's a 5-star tight end. It's like that's just the nature of when you play in the SEC, but you play at one of the blue bloods, if you will, of the SEC. Like everybody is good, everybody is talented, and really the thing that separates you at first is age, particularly at the quarterback position. But I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I think Gunner will play well, but he's fairly unproven, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think people love his intangibles. I think they think he's tough. I think he's a good leader. I think the team is behind him, and I think the coaches trust him. All of those things are great things. But at the end of the day, you got to go perform.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest question mark with him. Do I
Yeah.
think he has the talent to? Certainly. But no one's seen it. You know what I mean? And pretty much, unless you have the defense that we had in that first national championship run, it's like this every college football team goes as the quarterback goes. You know what I mean? And that's just the nature of football, really. So it's a long-winded answer of me saying like I am optimistic that he will answer the call, but the phone's ringing and he's got to answer it.
Right. I think we're in the same boat, right? I think those intangibles you just mentioned, we've seen
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of quarterbacks. I'm talking about across all levels of football, even
Mm-hmm.
NFL. You hear the training camp, oh, it's a great leader, tough guy, gritty, smart, what have you, knows where he's going with the football, and then he doesn't perform for one
Totally.
reason or the other, right? What I think makes me optimistic, I won't rehash what you said, but what makes me optimistic is I think it's kind of funny too, and it's fun to think this too, and to know that Gunnar Stockton is very, very competitive, very
Oh my
competitive.
God.
But he
Ruthless.
gives the Rabun County Tiger Georgia just kind of good old boy, right? And I
Nah, he's
think
a killer, dude.
exactly. So I think that's why I am a little optimistic from a standpoint of whereas he will almost be driven at a place like Tennessee against that team in Neyland
Yeah.
Stadium. I think that competitiveness might take over and just kind of push him beyond the nerves and everything that comes with playing in that stadium on the road and that rivalry, and it being your first SEC road game.
And don't forget, Rabun County you're close to Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
It's like you go to like Seminole County, Georgia, even Valdosta, Lowndes County. It's like you see a lot of G's, but you see a lot of Seminoles too, right? when you get up to that part of the, North Georgia, and I'll keep my jokes to myself about what's going up there in the mountains, but there you'll start seeing some orange. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so like, don't think that again, and that's why I'm optimistic as well, right? Because like he's a competitor, and nobody knows the team better than the team, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, the guys on the team are the ones who know what the DNA is, right? Remember that a couple years ago we spoke to that kid, the DB, and he talked about like, hey, what's the DNA of this team? And Kirby Smart was talking about that. Like, coaches know the team really well, but nobody truly knows the the emotional, psychological, physical makeup of the team better than the players. And by all accounts, and I think it's true, the players really like this kid, and they trust him, and they go to bat for him. And you kind of saw that when he came into the game last year.
Right.
But at the same time now, got to perform, because as much as people like you, it's like a left tackle will die for you, but then if you hold on to the goddamn ball too long, or you can't read or something, read the right people, or you're fumbling the snaps, it's like that tackle, he might cuss you out in the game. You know what I mean? And if you keep doing it, he might just turn around and open hand slap you with his bear paw, right? And it's like, because yes, Gunner is hyper competitive, but guess what? So is 83 other guys in that football team. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they come to Georgia to win. And I think I'm excited for him because it's such an opportunity. And man, if he does play well, they might just give him the governorship at the end of the season, because he's like, he's Georgia through and through. And and I'm just I'm optimistic, but
Yeah.
it is time to answer the phone. You know what I mean, or answer the bell.
Right. And obviously we'll talk more about this as the season goes, of course, but unless he throws 3 picks in the limited time he gets against Marshall and Austin Peay, I really don't care what he does in those games.
Yeah.
I'm looking at every other position, because the test obviously is SEC schedule, and it's at Tennessee. Is your first one there, September 13th.
Yep.
But we got a few more minutes here. So let's talk some defense real quick. Already the biggest thing on defense last year was stopping the run, and Georgia was 36th in the country, and that was behind Georgia Tech in yards allowed per game, which is obviously the opposite of where you want to be. Now, there's some obviously contributing factors. It wasn't all on the defensive line, right? It's the entire defense. It's a front seven. It's also the offense putting the defense in such bad problems with the drop passes, with the turnovers. Carson Beck doubled his interception total from the previous season. So all those things kind of contribute here. But at the same time, it's Georgia, and Kirby Smart he doesn't even mention those things when he talks about it. He just wants more out of this group. So there's that at the same time. This group has to be better. And it's a new group too. You're losing Mike Kell, you're losing Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson. So how are they playing in fall camp, right? In spring, it was more of the offense playing well, kind of dicing up here and there when they want to, and showing off. Well, we're not hearing in fall camp so far. That defensive line is playing really good, kicking butt. And that first scrimmage last week, they have another one here Saturday, last one. And that's really good to hear. Because if that run game gets going on offense and the Gunner's okay, let's assume that he is, and he doesn't lose you to the game, and he actually makes plays when he needs to, which let's think 2021, that's how it was. It was a great defense, run game that really dominated most opponents. And then when he needed to, when the offense needed to, they stepped up, add A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers, and then Stetson and his legs, what have you, just made plays when they needed to, and it ended with a national championship. So I think this defense needs to be kind of like that 21 team, considering quarterback and all the questions on offense. And, you have Elijah Griffin. We're talking about standouts here, another freshman. He's living up to that 5-star pedigree, just like Talon Taylor was. He's been really good. I'm not going to, I've heard everybody wants to make the comparisons to Jalen Carter. That's a generational guy. I don't think that's fair right now. Let's see the man play first. He's going to be rotating in. I think that's comfortable to say just on how he's performed so far. You got Kristen Miller, Xavier McLeod, leading that way. and Kristen Miller could be all SEC by the end of the season. Xavier, former South Carolina transfer, did some good things at times last season, battled some injuries, battled just coming into a new system and playing behind NFL draft picks. But now this team is theirs as far as the defensive line. And Elijah Griffin, he's going to get some early snaps, man, and I'm excited to see what he can do. But that's a big thing. So if we're 7 weeks into the season and that run defense is looking porous, and with all things else considered okay in the defense, then that's obviously not a good sign at all. But it's something to watch, right? Because when Georgia stops running and dominates opponents on the defensive line, good things happen. National championships happen.
Yeah. I typically don't get concerned when it comes to, and again, like I probably sound like an old radio who's skipping, right? Or a record player that's just skipping over and over. But it's really hard for me to get super concerned about defense so long as Kirby Smart is at the helm, because it's like it's in his DNA. And, I think Kirby would take this as a compliment. He's a psychopath, right? Like he's a crazy person, Kirby. And he has a passion for defense. He has a passion for firing people up. And defense is such a, people always think it's like, it is like super rah, out hit people, block tackle, but it's also, schematically, and it's just, there's a lot of football intellect that goes behind it. And one thing that Kirby's defenses always do a great job of is they play smart, disciplined football, but they combine that with that like aggression, that physicality, and that discipline. And that has nothing to do with talent. That has everything to do with development, system, culture. And, again, I go back to the recruiting piece, like they're always going to have talent. So as long as they keep the same attitude, both whether it be the defensive line, which we're talking about now, but just really writ large, right? That second level, and then obviously the DB level, I think the defense will be fine. But to your point, it starts up front. So if there are struggles, right, that's a problem. But I just think that knowing the culture too that's there, because I know some of the coaches on that staff, right, Searles, Bobo, et cetera, the environment that they create, the competition starts up front, right? So that offensive defensive line, day in and day out, it is a battle, right? And I know Searles, he's also a bit sick and twisted, right? He is creating these inner rivalries between, the top guard and the top tackle and the top interior offensive lineman and the top pass rusher, because he realizes that they need to just dig that competitive spirit out of each other to heighten their ability to play at the highest level. And I think that's going on right now, because I guarantee this, I have no inside knowledge to this, but I guarantee you since the end of last year, Kirby and company have been drilling into these players' heads that people think that they are the second and third tier of the SEC, that they're washed up, that the best years are behind them, that they got lucky with one skinny kid from South Georgia at quarterback who had some magic, but they've got nothing else, right? Yeah. I've got no inside knowledge to that, but I know how some of these coaches think, and I think we all know how Kirby operates and how psychologically he's wired. And so, every single day they are rising the competition level each week. And humility is something that they are leading in with. And complacency is a cancer that they will not let it infect the team. And I think that's to me, that starts on the interior line, both defensively and offensively, because that's where you can get away with having a little bit less natural talent. But if you have the right attitude and the right grit, you're going to have a lot of success. And I think that's kind of where the trenches are for both sides of the ball right now.
Right. And we'll get into the offensive line next week, and also safeties I wanted to touch on, and edge position too. But save time, we'll end it here. Georgia's identity in 25. I think we summed it up defensively. And I'm like I don't worry too much just from putting my Georgia fandom hat on, being like, one of my concerns and not. Defensively, there's always going to be questions each year because of roster attrition, transfer portal,
100%.
everything, right? But at the same time, you're more often than not, you're correct in just relying on the defensive minds on that coaching staff, and then the players, blue chip recruits, just lining the entire defense, trusting them
it's
to
insane.
be really good. Right. But offensively, that's more the question here, I think. And Kirby Smart, I think, summed this up really well the other day. He was asked about it after that first scrimmage on Saturday, and he said, an identity. Speaking of offense, an identity of toughness, physical, setting edges, delivering the run game, denting the defense. That's what we love to be. We have to have a great run game to, number one, help a quarterback, relieve third and longs, feature backs, and then utilize play action. So those guys are working really hard. Been pleased with the group. They continue to work hard and do what we need to do. It sounds like he wants that run game to be firing on. He mentioned about 5 different things a run game. It said play action, so that's maybe that's a pass, and the quarterback wants, man. But he wants to run the stinking ball, Artie.
Coach Kirby Smart is Nick Saban in a nutshell. He only pivots offensively if he absolutely has to. Do we not remember? Everyone loved Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm, awesome college quarterback. They ran the ball like lunatics, like it was 1965, right? It was run, hit him in the mouth, and destroy people on defense. And if Kirby can get back to that winning philosophy, and I don't know if you can do it in this day and age in college football, but I think that's what he's gunning for, and that would be his wish. So, yeah, give me 4 running backs that no one's really heard of, and let's just run it down people's throats and have a heavyweight fight every single week. That's what I would love to see. But anyway, Lord knows we got enough tight ends, and we can talk about them next time as well. But I'm excited for this season, man, and excited for you and excited to see where this thing goes.